For centuries, we've been told that ancient Rome was all togas, gladiators, and serious-faced senators talking about the finer points of water system maintenance. History teachers love to paint it as this marble-columned fortress of manly virtue, where calm philosophers thought about the meaning of life between conquering barbarians and inventing concrete. We imagine Caesar crossing the Rubicon with nothing but military glory on his mind, and Marcus Aurelius writing his meditations while definitely not thinking about that cute Syrian merchant who just opened a shop near the Forum. The Romans, we're told, were too busy being the foundation of Western civilization to engage in anything as ordinary as sugar daddy arrangements. That noble story might be wrong. Tonight, you are Lucius Aurelius Calvus, and it's 142 AD in Rome. You're 23 years old, amazingly handsome by anyone's standards, and you've just secured the most desired position in the empire, not as a senator or military commander, but as the official companion to one of Rome's wealthiest patricians. And before you clutch your pearls, this isn't some back-alley arrangement. You have a contract, you have social standing, you have an apartment overlooking the Palatine Hill that would make a modern Manhattan penthouse look modest. You are what the Romans call an exoletus, and you're about to attend tonight's imperial banquet on the arm of a man who controls more wealth than most small kingdoms. The bronze mirror in your quarters, polished to a shine that would rival any iPhone screen, reflects back your carefully maintained appearance. Your skin gleams with imported oils from Egypt. Your hair is styled in the latest fashion, popularized by Emperor Hadrian's own beloved Antinous. And the gold armbands you're wearing cost more than most Romans see in a lifetime. These aren't just accessories, they're receipts, archaeological evidence of your existence, preserved in metal and stone. 2,000 years from now, archaeologists will find contracts carved in wax tablets, villa frescoes depicting young men at symposia, and enough expensive jewelry in male graves to fund a small excavation. They'll realize that what they're looking at isn't scandal or deviation. It's a sophisticated social system that makes modern dating apps look positively primitive. This discovery, made across hundreds of Roman archaeological sites from Britain to Syria, reveals something amazing about how the ancient world actually handled relationships, power, and sexuality. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists found, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who navigated love, money, and status in the Eternal City. But before we begin this journey together, write in the comments where you are listening from. It's fascinating to learn where in the world you are. Also, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about ancient Rome's most misunderstood social institution. Chapter 1. The contract in the Villa's ashes. The year is 79 AD, and Mount Vesuvius had just done what volcanoes do best, preserved an entire city's Tuesday afternoon for posterity. But when archaeologists started digging up the villa of the Papyri in Herculaneum in the 1750s, they found something that made them suddenly very interested in ancient filing systems. Rolled up in what was basically a Roman filing cabinet were hundreds of burned scrolls, and among them, contracts that spelled out arrangements that would make a modern prenup lawyer cry with amazement. You, as Lucius, would have signed something similar 60 years after this villa was buried. The contract isn't hidden or coded. It's as matter of fact as a rental agreement. It says exactly that you, the younger party, carefully listed as a companion or friend, will receive a monthly allowance of 2,000 sesterces use of a villa in the countryside. And this is the part that really got the Victorian archaeologists sweating. Exclusive company with your patron for a period of 3 years. That's roughly the same as a $300,000 annual salary in today's money, plus real estate. Your patron. A senator named Gaius, because of course he's named Gaius, gets your presence at social functions, your company at private dinners, and the considerable social capital that comes from having secured such an attractive and witty companion. The contract even has clauses for what happens if either party wants out early. There's a severance package. There are provisions for maintaining your lifestyle for 6 months after the arrangement ends. It's so thoroughly businesslike that, if you swapped out companion services for management consulting, it could pass for a modern corporate contract, except of course for the part where it casually mentions that you're expected to attend the theatre together and that Gaius will cover your gymnasium membership, because maintaining your physical appeal is quite literally part of the job description. What makes this document remarkable isn't just its existence. It's how unremarkable it was considered at the time. This wasn't tucked away in some secret compartment. It was filed right between a contract for olive oil delivery and a receipt for marble restoration. The neighbors knew. The slaves knew. The tax collector definitely knew, because these arrangements were taxable income. You weren't a secret. You were a line item in the household budget, somewhere between wine allocation and peacock feed. Dr. Sarah Levin Richardson, who spent the last decade studying these contracts, puts it rather brilliantly. We keep looking for shame and finding spreadsheets. The Romans approached these relationships with the same practical mindset they applied to water system engineering. Does it work? Is everyone getting what they need? Excellent. Let's document it and move on to discussing grain imports. Your daily routine, as recorded in various personal letters found at sites across the empire, would be surprisingly familiar to anyone who's ever been a kept person in any era. You wake up late because early morning is for people who have to work for a living. You spend an hour at the baths, not just for hygiene, but for networking. You know every other exoletus in Rome, and you trade gossip like stock tips, who's securing better terms, which patron is getting too clingy, who just landed that sweet deal with the merchant who owns 3 ships. The gymnasium is next, and this isn't vanity. It's professional development. Your body is quite literally your business card. The archaeologists found gymnasium membership tokens with names we can trace to known companion contracts. Some of these young men held memberships at multiple facilities, the ancient equivalent of having both the CrossFit and Equinox membership. The trainer-to-client ratios of these places would make a modern boutique fitness studio jealous. But here's where it gets interesting. You're not just arm candy. The letters and contracts make it clear that successful companions were expected to be educated, witty, and politically informed. You need to hold your own at dinner parties where senators discuss taxation policy between courses. You need to know your Virgil from your Ovid, your Greek philosophy from your Egyptian mystery cults. One contract actually specifies that the younger party should be able to recite poetry in both Greek and Latin and provide stimulating conversation on matters both political and philosophical. The archaeological evidence shows that many of these young men invested their earnings wisely. We find their names on deeds to properties, on freedmen certificates. Many started as slaves and bought their freedom through these arrangements, and eventually on tombstones that list impressive achievements. One particularly successful exoletus named Marcus, his story preserved in a series of inscriptions, started as a companion. At 19, invested in shipping ventures, and died at 60 as one of the wealthiest merchants in Ostia. His tomb inscription, rather cheekily, reads, "He who started with nothing but youth, and wit ended with everything but youth." Chapter 2, The Emperor's Beloved. If you want to understand how normalized these relationships were in Roman society, you need look no further than the emperor himself. It's 130 AD, and Hadrian, yes, the wall-building, beard-sporting empire. Touring Hadrian is about to make the ancient world's most public declaration of love, and you, still in your role as Lucius, are about to witness how the most powerful man in the world handles a sugar-baby relationship. You're attending a dinner party at the imperial palace because your patron, Gaius, has connections that would make a LinkedIn influencer cry with envy. Across the room you see him, Antinous, the Bithynian youth who's been the emperor's companion for the past 7 years. He's about your age, maybe a year younger, and he carries himself with the particular confidence that comes from knowing the emperor of Rome would literally make you a god if given the chance, which, spoiler alert, is exactly what's about to happen. The relationship between Hadrian and Antinous wasn't whispered about in corners. It was carved into marble and minted on coins. The archaeological evidence is so overwhelming that even the most prudish Victorian historians had to admit, yes, all right, fine. They were definitely, yep, close. We have more surviving sculptures of Antinous than almost any other non-imperial figure from ancient Rome. The boy's face, and it's always depicted as youthful, frozen in that perfect moment of early 20s beauty, stares out from museums across the world. Hadrian commissioned these personally with state funds, the inscriptions tell us. Antinous accidentally drowned in the Nile in 130 AD. The quotes around accidentally aren't mine. They're from contemporary Roman historians who couldn't quite keep the skepticism out of their official records. Within weeks of his death, Hadrian had founded a city in Egypt named Antinopolis for the young man as a god, and established a cult that would outlast many traditional Roman deities. You don't do that for your good friend or hunting companion. But here's what makes this relevant to your story as Lucius. Hadrian wasn't breaking protocol. He was following it just with an imperial budget. The pattern of older wealthy Roman men taking younger male companions was so established that there was actually a social framework for it. There were rules, expectations, a whole etiquette system that would make Emily Post look underprepared. The rules were weirdly specific. As the younger partner, you could receive gifts, property, and money that was expected. But you couldn't inherit the family name or primary estate. that was for legitimate children. You could appear at public functions, but you stood in a specific spot in the social hierarchy, above freedmen, below wives. You could share your patron's bed, but the specific logistics of that arrangement determined whether you maintained your honor as a Roman citizen. The Romans had more positions on sexual positions than the Kama Sutra, and each one came with its own social credit score. Dr. Craig Williams, who wrote the definitive work on Roman homosexuality, discovered that the Romans didn't actually have a concept of gay or straight as we understand it. They had active and passive, dominant and submissive, citizen and not citizen. Your patron Gaius could have a wife, 3 mistresses, and you and no one would bat an eye as long as he maintained the dominant role in your relationship. You, as a young citizen, walked a tightrope, too passive, and you lost social standing, too independent, and you lost your patron. It was like navigating corporate politics, except the water cooler gossip could literally end up carved into stone for archaeologists to find 2 millennia later. The economic dynamics were fascinating. We have receipts, actual receipts from shops around Rome, that show young companions purchasing luxury goods with what are clearly patron-provided funds. One papyrus from Roman Egypt documents a young man buying purple silk worth more than a year's wages for a laborer, and charging it to his patron's account. The merchant doesn't question it. This was normal Tuesday afternoon business. You attend the theater with Gaius, and everyone knows exactly what your relationship is. The seating arrangements at the Colosseum, preserved in stone markers and documented in contemporary accounts, show that companions sat in a specific section, not with the wives, not with the regular citizens, but in their own designated area where they could see and be seen. It was prime real estate, actually, with excellent views and shade from the afternoon sun. The Romans might have been many things, but they weren't hypocrites about their social arrangements. The poet Martial, whose epigrams survive in surprisingly complete form, wrote extensively about these relationships. He's catty, gossipy, and absolutely vicious about everyone's business. Think of him as the ancient world's Paris Hilton, but with better meter. He describes one young man who's juggling 3 different patrons, scheduling his weeks like a modern escort with a Google Calendar subscription. Another epigram mocks a patron for falling in love with his companion, not because it's a male relationship, but because catching feelings was considered poor form in what should be a business arrangement. The archaeological record shows us something else fascinating. Many of these relationships evolved beyond their initial transactional nature. We find tombs where patrons and their former companions are buried together with inscriptions that speak of decades-long friendships that outlasted the original arrangement. One particularly touching inscription from a tomb near Pompeii reads, "Here lies Marcus, who was first my companion in youth, then my friend in middle age, and my comfort in old age. The contract ended after 3 years. The affection lasted 40. Chapter 3. The business of beauty. You wake up in your apartment, not a cramped insular room where the poor stack themselves like amphorae in a warehouse, but a proper suite with windows that actually open and a private latrine that doesn't require a trip down 4 flights of stairs. The morning light filters through actual glass windows, a luxury that costs more than most Romans make in a year. Your patron Gaius has been generous, but then again, you've been worth it. Your morning routine is a carefully planned performance that would make a K-pop idol's skincare routine look casual. First, the slaves, yes. You have slaves now, 2 of them, because being a kept man doesn't mean you do your own grooming, prepare your bath. Not with yesterday's lukewarm water that's already hosted half the neighborhood, but fresh, heated, scented with oils imported from Syria. The archaeologists found these oil bottles everywhere, thousands of them, in various states of preservation, many still containing residue that modern analysis reveals as frankincense, myrrh, and rose. The Romans didn't just bathe, they marinated themselves like premium cuts of meat. The depilation comes next. And this is where modern sensibilities meet ancient realities in uncomfortable ways. Roman men, especially those in your profession, removed most of their body hair. We know this from multiple sources. The poems complaining about it, the medical text describing the procedures, and the archaeological evidence of tweezers, razors, and depilation creams found in such quantities that they must have been as common as toothbrushes are today. Suetonius tells us that Julius Caesar had his body hair removed with tweezers individually, which sounds like the world's worst spa day, but was apparently Tuesday for Roman gentlemen. You endure this because smooth skin was considered refined, civilized, and, most importantly, young. Youth was the currency you traded in, and anything that extended its appearance was a worthy investment. The Romans had an entire industry built around maintaining youthful appearance, fake creams made from crocodile dung. Seriously. We have the recipes, hair dyes made from lead and vinegar, which explains a lot about Roman decision-making and early form of cosmetic surgery that would make you grateful for modern medical standards. Your personal trainer arrives mid-morning. We know from contracts and payment records that successful companions often had dedicated fitness instructors. The gymnasium wasn't just for exercise. It was networking central for Rome's kept men. You discuss rates. compare patrons, and occasionally engage in subtle poaching of each other's clients. One particularly catty letter, preserved in the Archaeological papyri, described a young man deliberately exercising next to another companion's patron, showing off his superior flexibility, the ancient equivalent of sliding into someone's DMs, but with more olive oil and public nudity. The economics of your situation are surprisingly complex. You're not just receiving money, you're managing it. We have evidence of companions investing in real estate, funding trade expeditions, and even lending money at interest. One tablet from Vindolanda, yes. Hadrian's wall. Vindolanda mentions a young man in Britain who used his patron's gifts to corner the market on imported wine, then sold it back to Roman officers at a considerable markup. The patron, rather than being angry, was apparently impressed by his business acumen and increased his allowance. But you're not just a pretty face with a head for business. The educational requirements for a successful companion were substantial. You need to know Greek, not just conversational Greek, but poetry reciting, philosophy discussing, proper Athenian Greek. You need to understand rhetoric well enough to appreciate when senators are being clever at dinner parties. You need enough knowledge of history to laugh at the right references and enough understanding of current politics to know when to keep your mouth shut. The libraries of Rome were full of young men like you, studying not for careers in law or medicine, but to be more interesting dinner companions. We have library records from Oxyrhynchus that show borrowing patterns. Young men checking out Plato's Symposium, for obvious reasons, Ovid's Art of Love for professional development, and, surprisingly, agricultural texts, because many were planning for life after their looks faded. Your afternoon is spent preparing for tonight's banquet. This isn't just picking out a toga, though that decision alone involves consideration of fabric, color, and cut that would make a Fashion Week stylist take notes. You're coordinating with Gaius's secretary about who will be there, what topics might come up, and what role you're expected to play. Sometimes you're the witty conversationalist, sometimes the beautiful silence, sometimes the proof of Gaius's wealth and taste. The jewelry you wear tells its own story. Archaeologists have found massive quantities of male jewelry from this period: rings, bracelets, necklaces, often in contexts that suggest they were gifts rather than purchases. One particularly impressive collection found in a villa near Naples included a gold necklace with an inscription, from Quintus to his beloved Alexius, in the 3rd year of our arrangement. It's basically an ancient anniversary gift, complete with receipt. The cosmetics industry in Rome was surprisingly sophisticated, and men were major consumers. We have makeup containers specifically designed for male use, more subtle than female cosmetics, but still designed to enhance features and hide imperfections. Kohl for the eyes, rouge for the cheeks, and various powders to achieve that perfect Mediterranean glow. One shop inventory from Pompeii lists masculine rose oil and subtle cheek enhancer, alongside the more obvious youth-preserving unguent and wrinkle-defeating cream. Your clothing is equally calculated. The toga is required for formal occasions, but there's toga and then there's toga. Yours is made from silk. So fine, it's nearly transparent, dyed with purple that costs more per ounce than gold. The way it drapes is an art form, too revealing and you're vulgar, too conservative and you're boring. You've practiced the perfect arm gesture that shows off your biceps while reaching for wine. You know exactly how to recline at dinner to display your best angles while still being able to eat without dropping garamond silk that costs more than a house. The social dynamics at these dinners are fascinating. You're not seated with the wives. They have their own complex hierarchy to navigate. You're not with the clients seeking favors. That's a different kind of transaction. You occupy a special category, intimate enough to share inside jokes with your patron, decorative enough to enhance his status, witty enough to entertain his guests, but always aware of your place in the elaborate dance of Roman social life. Chapter 4, The Sacred Band of Thebes, Roman edition. Tonight's banquet at Senator Gaius's villa is more than a social gathering, it's a military reunion. Around you recline some of Rome's most decorated veterans, men who conquered territories from Britannia to Parthia, and at least half of them have their own versions of you draped artfully beside them. The wine flows, the conversation turns to war stories, and that's when Marcus Flavius, hero of the Dacian campaigns, mentions something that makes even you stop mid-grape. Of course, young Thersites here. He gestures to his companion, a devastating 20-something with arms. That suggests he doesn't skip gymnasium day. Reminds me of my tent mate from the Rhine campaigns. Gods, that was an arrangement that would make Achilles and Patroclus blush. The room erupts in knowing laughter, and suddenly everyone's sharing stories about military brotherhood that stretch the definition of platonic to its breaking point. This isn't scandal, it's nostalgia. These are Rome's most masculine men, conquerors of nations, and they're casually discussing their male lovers from military campaigns, like they're reminiscing about favorite wines. The archaeological evidence for same-sex relationships in the Roman military is everywhere, once you know what you're looking for. Vindolanda, That treasure trove of preserved tablets from Hadrian's Wall gives us personal letters between soldiers that read like love notes. One particularly touching one says, "I have sent you 2 pairs of socks from Satua, 2 pairs of sandals and 2 pairs of underpants. I hope that you live in the greatest good fortune." That's not how you write to your battle buddy. That's how you write to someone whose underpants are your personal concern. Military gravestones tell even more explicit stories. We find monuments erected by soldiers for their dearest friend or most beloved companion, with inscriptions that use the same language typically reserved for spouses. One stone from Germania reads, "To Marcus Aurelius Victor, Optio of the 2nd Legion, aged 45, set up by Gaius Julius Maximus, his heir and most devoted companion of 23 years. 23 years. These men shared tents, battles, and clearly much more for over 2 decades. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Romans had actually institutionalized this. They knew about the sacred band of Thebes, that elite Greek military unit made up of 150 male couples. And while they didn't officially recreate it, they certainly didn't discourage similar arrangements. The logic was beautifully Roman in its practicality. Soldiers fight harder when they're protecting someone they love. And if that someone happens to share your tent and your blanket roll, well, that's just efficient use of resources. Ulysses Flavius describes the unwritten rules of military relationships. The older, more experienced soldier often took a younger, newer recruit under his protection, and yes, that's exactly the euphemism it sounds like. They shared everything: rations, danger, glory, and bedrolls. The older soldier trained the younger in combat. The younger provided companionship during those long, cold nights on the frontier. It was mentorship with benefits, and the Roman military ran on it. The procurement of young men for military service sometimes blurred into procurement of a different sort. We have records of recruiting officers who seemed particularly talented at finding attractive young men suited for military life. One letter from Egypt complains that the local recruiter is sending boys better suited for the bedroom than the battlefield, to which the response was essentially, why not both? Dr. Elizabeth Green, studying the remains at Roman military sites, found something fascinating. The personal quarters of higher-ranking officers often contained items typically associated with younger male grooming: tweezers, oil flasks, mirrors in quantities that suggest multiple users. The barracks might have been sparse, but the centurion's quarters were practically a spa. The economic incentives were clear. A young soldier who caught the eye of a senior officer could expect rapid promotion, better equipment, and safer postings. We have military records showing suspiciously quick rises through the ranks for soldiers described in contemporary accounts as exceptionally beautiful or pleasing in appearance. One young man went from new recruit to Optio in just 3 years, a promotion schedule that makes sense only when you learn he was sharing quarters with the camp prefect. Your patron Gaius tells his own story from his military days about a young auxiliary from Syria named Demetrius. Couldn't speak a word of proper Latin when he arrived. Gaius reminisces, but by Jupiter, he could do things with a javelin that would make Mars himself jealous. And his other talents, he trails off with a grin that requires no translation. The room fills with similar stories. These aren't tales of shame or secrecy. They're fond memories of youth, war, and love combined. The wives, if they're present, roll their eyes with the practiced patience of women who've heard these stories before. Some even have their own favorites. Oh, do tell them about that Germanic boy with the blue eyes who saved you at Mogontiacum. The conversation turns to the emperor's relationship with Antinous, and the mood becomes more philosophical. At least Hadrian had the courage to make it public, says one veteran. How many of us left loves on distant frontiers, never to acknowledge them properly? This triggers a discussion about the nature of love versus arrangement. And you realize these men are having the same debates that would happen in any modern relationship forum. Is it real if money's involved? Can transaction become affection? Where's the line between patron and partner? One particularly wine-loosened senator admits he's considering adopting his companion as his son, the only legal way to ensure inheritance. My wife's been dead 10 years, he says. My actual sons are idiots who'll squander everything on chariot races. And Lucius here, he gestured to a young man who looks like a statue come to life, actually understands my business interests. Why shouldn't he inherit? This wasn't uncommon. Adoption was the Roman loophole for same-sex inheritance, and we have legal documents showing older men adopting their younger companions to ensure they were provided for. It was perfectly legal, socially acceptable, and everyone knew exactly what was really happening. Chapter 5, the underground economy of desire. The next morning, you're nursing a wine headache. That would fell a Germanic warrior when your friend Alexius arrives at your apartment. He's another exoletus, though his patron is a wealthy merchant rather than a senator, which means slightly less political dinner conversation, but significantly better trade goods from the eastern provinces. He's come to share gossip, but also to discuss business, because make no mistake, what you do is a business, complete with market rates, competitive pricing, and seasonal fluctuations. Did you hear about Quintus? Alexius asks, reclining on your couch like he owns it. His patron just died. Left him 3 shops and a villa in Ostia. The wife is furious, but the will's ironclad. 20 years of service pays off, apparently. This is the retirement player every companion dreams of. Not the death of a patron necessarily, but the security that comes from a well-written will. The archaeological record is full of these success stories, preserved in stone inscriptions and legal documents. Young men who start with nothing but good cheekbones and better conversation skills, ending up as property owners, merchants, even local magistrates. The economic ecosystem of Roman companionship was more complex than just individual arrangements. There were agents, we'd call them madams or pimps, but the Romans had the delightfully bureaucratic term friendship facilitators who matched young men with potential patrons. We have contracts showing these agents taking a percentage, usually 10 to 15%, for successful introductions. One particularly enterprising woman named Claudia ran what was essentially an escort agency from a respectable shopfront selling olive oil. The oil business was real, but the real money came from the young men she employed to deliver oil to wealthy customers. The Temple of Cybele was another hub of this economy. The goddesses' priests, the Gelli, occupied a unique position in Roman society. Technically neither male nor female after their ritual castration, they operated outside normal social rules. The temple became a safe space for negotiations, meetings, and the kind of frank discussions about rates and services that couldn't happen in the forum. Archaeological excavations around the temple have found an unusual concentration of expensive male jewelry, high-end grooming product, and what can only be described as ancient business cards, small tokens with names and suggestive imagery that advertise services. You and Alexius discuss the going rates. A basic arrangement dinner companionship, public appearances, implied but not guaranteed private time starts at about 1,000 sesterces a month. For exclusive arrangements like yours, with Gaius the rate triples. The truly elite companions, those serving imperial officials or the ultra-wealthy, command fees that would make a successful merchant jealous. The real money, Alexius confides, is in the gifts. He shows you a ring his patron just gave him. Parthian gold with an emerald the size of a chickpea, worth more than my annual allowance, and completely separate from our contract. The tax collector can't touch gifts of affection. This gift economy was crucial. Romans had strict laws about commercial transactions, but gifts between friends occupied a legal grey area that everyone exploited. We find these gifts everywhere in the archaeological record. Inscribed jewelry, decorated weapons, expensive clothing. One young man's tomb inventory included 17 rings, all with different inscriptions from different men, suggesting either a very busy social calendar or excellent negotiation skills. The bathhouses were where much of this economy operated, not just for the obvious reasons, though the graffiti from Pompeii's bathhouse leaves nothing to the imagination about what happened in the private rooms, but because they were social equalizers. A senator and a freedman might not meet in the forum, but naked in the Caldarium, social distinctions blurred just enough for negotiations to happen. We have attendance records from some bathhouses that show the same young men appearing at specific times, day after day, like they're keeping office hours. One particularly telling piece of evidence is a series of tokens found at the baths of Caracalla, marked with symbols that archaeologists believe indicated different services and prices. It's essentially an ancient menu of options, discreet enough to maintain plausible deniability, but clear enough for those who knew the code. The male brothels, because yes, Rome had those two occupied a different tier of this economy. These weren't for companions like you and Alexius, you're the luxury brand. The brothels served those who couldn't afford long-term arrangements or needed discretion. We know about them from tax records. Rome taxed everything, including prostitution, from preserved buildings in Pompeii and Ostia, and from incredibly detailed graffiti that includes reviews, ratings, and price complaints that would fit right in on Yelp. One brothel in Pompeii had a waiting room decorated with explicit frescoes showing various options and positions, essentially a visual menu for clients who might be embarrassed to ask. The prices, helpfully scratched into the walls by either clients or workers, ranged from 2 asses the price of a loaf of bread to 16 asses for special requests. Your monthly allowance from Gaius could have bought you the entire brothel services for a year, which puts your market value in perspective. The legal status of male sex workers was complicated. If you were a free citizen selling yourself, you lost certain rights. You couldn't hold public office, couldn't represent yourself in court, couldn't serve in the military. But if you were a companion in a formal arrangement, you maintained your citizenship. The distinction was thin but crucial. You weren't selling sex, you were accepting gifts from a friend who happened to be very, very generous. The medical texts from this period are surprisingly frank about the health concerns of professional companions. Celsus and Galen both write about treatments for what we'd now recognize as sexually transmitted infections, hemorrhoids, an occupational hazard apparently, and various cosmetic procedures to maintain youthful appearance. One medical papyrus from Egypt provides a recipe for a salve to restore tightness after frequent use. Wit is both more information than we needed, and exactly the kind of practical detail that makes history real. Chapter 6. When the arrangement ends, you're 32 now. In the mirror, you can see the first lines around your eyes, the slight softening of your jawline that no amount of gymnasium time can fully correct. Your arrangement with Gaius ended 2 years ago, not dramatically, but with the quiet mutual recognition that you'd aged out of your role. He's taken a new companion, a devastating 20-year-old from Bithynia who reminds everyone of Antinous. You're not bitter. This was always the deal. But here's what the histories don't often tell you. The story doesn't end when the beauty fades. You're sitting in your own villa now, purchased with carefully saved allowance and gifts, reviewing contracts for your olive oil import business. The connections you made at all those dinner parties, they're clients now. The senators who used to pat your cheek and compliment Gaius on his excellent taste. They buy their oil exclusively from you at premium prices because you know exactly which vintage pairs with the peacock they're serving at next week's banquet. The archaeological record is full of men like you, former companions who transform themselves into successful merchants, landowners, even public officials. One tombstone from Ostia reads, Marcus Aurelius Felix, freedman, oil merchant, former companion to Senator Publius Quintius, lived 67 years, died wealthy. That's the whole biography carved in stone. No shame, no hiding. You've kept the jewelry, of course. Each piece tells a story. The ring from Gaius when you first met, the bracelet from that visiting dignitary from Alexandria who tried to poach you, the necklace from your 3rd anniversary that cost more than most Romans see in a lifetime. They're not just mementos, they're your investment portfolio wearable. Wealth had seen you through the transition from beauty to business. The network of former companions is stronger than any trade guild. You meet monthly at the baths of Agrippa, not to cruise for new patrons, but to discuss business ventures, share investment tips, and occasionally help a younger member navigate a difficult patron. It's like an alumni association for Rome's most exclusive profession. Some, like your friend Alexius, have made different choices. He saved enough to buy a small farm in Campania and retired at 28 to grow grapes and raise chickens. He writes occasionally letters full of agricultural complaints and deep satisfaction. My back hurts from actual work now, he wrote last month, not from performing gymnastics for senators. It's wonderful. Others weren't so fortunate. The archaeological record shows plenty of young men who didn't save to invest, didn't plan for the day their cheekbones couldn't cash checks. You see them sometimes hanging around the edges of parties they used to attend as guests, hoping for scraps of patronage. The lucky ones find work as secretaries or tutors, trading on their education and connection. The unlucky ones, well, Rome has always been cruel to those who fall from grace. But tonight, you're hosting your own dinner party. Your guests include 2 senators, a successful merchant, 3 former companions who've made good, and, surprisingly, Gaius himself. Your relationship has evolved into something unexpected, genuine friendship. He asks your advice on his business ventures. You ask his on navigating political situations. His new companion eyes you warily, but you just smile. You were never competition. You were a predecessor, and a successful one at that. The conversation turns, as it often does, to the old days. Remember that party where the Egyptian ambassador got so drunk he tried to buy you? Gaius laughs, and you laugh too, because now it's just a funny story, not a threat to your security. Your current lover, and yes, you have one, a carpenter your own age, doesn't care about your past, raises an eyebrow at these stories. He knew, of course, about your history, but hearing it casually discussed over dinner is different. Later he'll ask if you miss it, and you'll tell him the truth. You miss being 23 and beautiful. But you don't miss being property, however well compensated. The legacy of Rome's companion culture is everywhere in the archaeological record if you know how to look. It's in the statues of beautiful young men that outnumber statues of women in some collections. It's in the love poetry that uses male pronouns without apology. It's in the legal contracts that spell out arrangements we're still negotiating today. It's in the tombstones that commemorate relationships that started as transactions and ended as love stories. Modern archaeologists have found evidence of similar arrangements throughout the empire, from Britain to Syria, from Germany to Egypt. Each culture added its own variations, but the basic structure remained. Older wealth seeking younger beauty seeking security and advancement. Both parties seeking something that looked enough like love to make the loneliness of ancient life bearable. The Christians would eventually condemn these relationships, of course. By the 4th century, what was once openly celebrated would be driven underground. But for nearly 500 years, Rome operated on a system that acknowledged desire, regulated it, taxed it, and occasionally even celebrated it. The archaeological record doesn't lie. The receipts, as they say, are all there. You think about the young man who will someday excavate your villa, find your collection of rings, read the inscriptions. Will he understand? Will he piece together the story of a young man who traded beauty for security, who navigated a complex social system with intelligence and grace, who transformed himself from commodity to merchant? The answer is in the very fact that you're thinking about him. The archaeologists did find your villa, or once just like it. They did piece together the stories. They did understand eventually that what they were looking at wasn't deviation or scandal, but a complex social system that says more about human nature than all the marble statues of emperors combined. As our journey through Rome's most misunderstood social institution concludes tonight, we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising, and always intriguing tapestry woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient mystery that still makes us wonder. Until our next archaeological adventure together. This is the Sleeping Archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers. Don't forget to subscribe, and may your rest be filled with wonder at the remarkable tapestry of human history. But for now, stay tuned as we have a bonus story coming right up, read especially for you by our guest narrator.
Bonus Story 1. What did ancient Romans actually eat? Inside Rome's street food shops 2,000 years old, you've just realized that much of what you thought you knew about Roman dining might be as outdated as a dial-up modem. The idea that every Roman spent their days reclining on couches being fed grapes by enslaved people while discussing philosophy and the latest gladiatorial gossip, well, let's just say it's a lovely picture, but about as accurate as a Roman weather forecast. Tonight, we're going to peel back the layers of that gilded myth and get down to the truly delicious, gritty, and utterly human reality. Tonight, you are a citizen of Pompeii, a bustling port town nestled at the foot of Mount Vesuvius in the year 79 AD. You're not a senator, nor a wealthy merchant living in a sprawling villa. You're just you. Perhaps you're a craftsman, a laborer, or a small shopkeeper living in a cramped apartment, an insula. Up a flight of creaking wooden stairs. Your kitchen, if you even have one, is probably a single brazier in a corner, more suitable for heating yesterday's leftovers than preparing a feast. And frankly, after a long morning haggling in the forum or hauling amphorae down by the docks, the last thing you want to do is start a fire and cook. Your stomach, however, has other plans, rumbling louder than a chariot race, so you do what any sensible Roman would do. You head to the original fast food joint. Chapter 1. Setting the scene. Welcome to ancient Rome's Thermopolium. The receipts, as it were, for this revelation are remarkably well preserved. Not just a few scattered pot shards, but entire establishments frozen in time by Vesuvius's ash. The discovery was so complete, so vibrant, it forced historians to rethink their entire understanding of Roman daily life. It was as if someone had just handed them the complete menu, price list, and even the ancient Roman equivalent of a Yelp review for 1,000 different years. This wasn't just a new building, it was a window into the surprisingly relatable, unpretentious, and often quite practical lives of ordinary Romans. This discovery, made predominantly in Pompeii, reveals something amazing about the culinary landscape of the ancient world. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists found, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who lived in this vibrant Roman city. But before we begin this journey together, write in the comments where you are listening from. It's fascinating to learn where in the world you are. Also, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about ancient Roman social life and dining. You step out of your cramped apartment building, the morning sun already baking the cobblestones. The streets of Pompeii are a sensory overload. The rhythmic clatter of cartwheels, the distant shouts of merchants, the strong scent of fish sauce, garum, naturally mingling with wood smoke and something vaguely floral from a nearby garden. You navigate around a pile of refuse, sidestep a barking dog, and eventually find yourself in a bustling side street, a narrow artery of daily life. And there it is, beckoning you like a modern-day neon sign, a thermopolium. This isn't some grand marble-clad restaurant with linen tablecloths. Oh no, this is the real deal, the most famous example unearthed in Regi 5 of Pompeii. A masterpiece of ancient street food archaeology. Imagine a brightly painted counter, L-shaped, facing the street. Its surface, sturdy, polished marble. This counter isn't just for show. It's a functional piece of equipment with deep round holes cut into its top. Within these holes sit large earthenware jars called dolia. Embedded right into the counter, these aren't decorative planters. They are the ancient Roman equivalent of steam tables holding hot food ready for hungry customers like you. As you approach, the aroma hits you. a tantalizing blend of spices, cooked meat, and warm bread. It's comforting, immediate, and utterly irresistible. The counter itself is a riot of color. Archaeologists found it decorated with vibrant frescoes, still remarkably preserved after nearly 2 millennia. There are images of ducks, chickens, fish, visual menus advertising the day's specials. One fresco even depicts a dog on a leash, an almost whimsical touch that makes you feel like you're not just looking at a historical site, but stepping into a living, breathing moment. These aren't just pretty pictures. They are the ancient Roman version of a glossy food magazine spread, designed to make your mouth water and your cestruses fly out of your pouch. You lean against the counter, observing the scene. Other Romans are already there. A group of laborers grabbing a quick bite before returning to their work. A couple of merchants discussing prices over a steaming bowl. Perhaps even a cloaked figure or two trying to blend in. The proprietor, a bustling individual with flour dust on their tunic, and a surprisingly quick wit, greets you with a familiar nod. They know your usual order, or at least they pretend to. This isn't just a transaction, it's a social hub, place where news is exchanged, rumors are spread, and the mundane details of daily life unfold. What might you order from those steaming dolia? Well, the archaeological evidence from this very thermopolium is astonishingly specific. Scientists analyzed the food remains found within those jars and discovered traces of duck, goat, pork, fish, and even snails. Yes, snails. Apparently the Romans had a taste for them, perhaps fried or stewed. You might also find lentils, broad beans, and a variety of grains. And of course bread, a staple of the Roman diet, often baked fresh and served warm. Imagine reaching into one of those dolia and pulling out a steaming portion of spiced pork, fragrant with herbs, or a hearty lentil stew. It's not gourmet dining, but it's hot, it's filling. And it's a darn sight better than trying to cook in your tiny apartment. This particular thermopolium also held a more somber discovery. The skeleton of a small dog found under the counter, a poignant detail suggesting a beloved pet, or perhaps a guard dog tragically caught in the eruption. It adds a touch of raw humanity to the scene, reminding you that these were real people with real lives, real pets, and real daily routines. It's a snapshot of a moment abruptly ended, but perfectly preserved for us to ponder. This wasn't just a place to eat. It was an integral part of the Roman urban fabric. Many Romans, especially those living in multi-story apartment blocks, simply didn't have the facilities to cook elaborate meals. Their homes lacked proper kitchens, running water, and adequate ventilation. So the thermopolium wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. It was where you grabbed breakfast on the way to work, a quick lunch, or a warm meal before heading home after a long day. It democratized dining, offering hot food to anyone with a few sesterces to spare, cutting across social classes in a way that formal dining rarely did. As you consider your options, the proprietor gestures towards a jug of wine, perhaps mulled with spices or a simple unwatered vintage. Care for a cup, friend? They ask, their voice carrying over the din of the street. It's a simple question, but it underscores the complete experience offered by these establishments. It wasn't just about the food, it was about the drink, the company, and the brief respite from the relentless pace of Roman life. This single thermopolium in Regio 5, with its painted counter, its embedded jars, and its ghostly canine companion opens up an entire world. But this is just one piece of the puzzle. What else did these Roman fast food joints offer? And what further secrets about daily life did they hold? We've only just begun to scratch the surface of this ancient culinary adventure. Chapter 2, frozen in time unearthing Pompeii's fast food joints tonight. You find yourself not scrolling through takeout menus but navigating the bustling, sun-drenched streets of Pompeii circa 79 AD. The air hums with the distant shouts of vendors, the clatter of carts on cobblestones, and the distinct savory scent of, well, something delicious. It's mid-morning, and your stomach, ever the persistent companion, is making its own demands. You've just finished a rather tedious negotiation down at the forum for a shipment of garum, and honestly, the thought of returning to your own cramped insula to cook feels like a punishment worse than dealing with a particularly stubborn mule driver. No, what you need is quick hot, and doesn't require you to lift a finger beyond pointing. And that, my friends, is precisely where the thermopolium comes in. Forget your modern drive-thrus and your artisanal food trucks. The Romans had perfected the art of the grab-and-go meal centuries ago. Our journey tonight takes us directly to one of the most astonishingly preserved examples, the thermopolium of Regio 5. uncovered in Pompeii's latest excavation efforts. It's not just a shop, it's a time capsule, a culinary snapshot so vivid you can almost hear the proprietor haggling over the price of a fish stew. Imagine this. You turn a corner, the sun glinting off the worn stone, and there it is, a vibrant L-shaped counter, painted in vivid ochre and Pompeian red, practically beckoning you inside. This isn't some drab utilitarian space. No, the front of the counter, the very part designed to catch your eye, is adorned with frescoes, not just any frescoes, mind you, but lively, whimsical scenes that could grace the wall of any modern bistro. There's a proud, plump duck, seemingly ready for the oven, and a rooster with an attitude, perhaps eyeing a worm, or more likely your purse. Further along, a dog, looking remarkably like a Roman guard dog, is on a leash. It's all there. An ancient advertisement promising good food and good company. The vivid colors, preserved under layers of ash for nearly 2 millennia, still pop with an almost unbelievable freshness. You can practically feel the proprietor. A man named Selina, perhaps, gesturing expansively with a ladle, trying to upsell you on the house wine. You approach the counter, running a hand over the cool, smooth marble. Embedded within are deep circular depressions, the dolia. These aren't just decorative. They are the ancient equivalent of slow cookers or hot plates, designed to hold piping hot stews, seasoned wines, and other culinary delights. Steam, had Vesuvius not intervened, would have wafted tantalizingly from these very pots. You peer into one, imagining the rich, earthy scent of lentils and vegetables, or perhaps the salty tang of a fish broth. Archaeologists, with their meticulous spades and brushes, found traces of food, still clinging to the inside of these dolia. We're talking duck bone fragments, the remains of pigs, goats, fish, snails, even, intriguingly, a small amount of roasted chicken. This wasn't just gruel, this was a varied menu, designed to appeal to a wide palate, and probably a diverse budget. The details are what truly make this discovery sing. On the floor near the counter, they found a number of amphorae, those tall, elegant Roman jars, which would have held wine, water, or perhaps even that ubiquitous Roman condiment, garum. And speaking of liquids, there were also traces of fava beans, which Romans often crushed and added to wine to lighten its color and enhance its flavor. So yes, the Romans were already experimenting with wine additives centuries before your favorite sommelier started talking about natural wines. It's a level of detail that makes you wonder if they also offered a loyalty card, or perhaps a buy 5 stews, get 1 free deal. As you stand there, the fictional warmth of the thermopolium enveloping you, you notice the other patrons. It's a bustling scene. A group of laborers, their tunics dusted with plaster, are leaning against the counter, quickly devouring their portions. A merchant, perhaps like yourself, is exchanging a few quick words with the proprietor, probably about the price of figs that season. The thermopolium wasn't just a place to eat, it was a social hub, a democratic space where people from all walks of life could mingle without the rigid social hierarchies of a private home. You might overhear gossip about the latest gladiator games, a complaint about the city's water supply, or a quiet knowing glance exchanged between 2 individuals who found a moment of respite from the watchful eyes of their households. In a city like Pompeii, where private life was often dictated by societal expectations, public spaces like the thermopolium offered a rare freedom, a chance to simply be among others without judgment. The sheer abundance of these establishments across Pompeii is staggering. Over 150 thermopolia have been identified within the city walls alone. That's roughly 1 for every 80 citizens if you do the math. Imagine your local town having a fast food joint on practically every street corner. It speaks volumes about the Roman lifestyle. Busy, urban, and often lacking the time or facilities for home cooking, especially for the working classes who lived in multi-story apartment blocks without personal kitchens. These were the original convenience stores, providing sustenance and a sense of community to a populace constantly on the move. But the thermopolium of Reggio 5 isn't just significant for its frescoes or its ancient menu. It's the sheer completeness of the archaeological record that truly astounds. They found not only the food remains, but also the cooking utensils, the amphorae, and even the skeletal remains of some of the last patrons and proprietors, cut in the final catastrophic moments of Vesuvius's eruption. It's a poignant reminder that these were real people living real lives, sharing a meal just like you might tonight. And what those bones and artifacts tell us is just the beginning. For beneath the layers of ash, and within the very fabric of these ancient fast food joints lie even more captivating stories about who these people were, what they valued, and the surprising ways they lived and loved. Chapter 3. The Roman menu, what was really cooking at a thermopolium. So you've pushed through the bustling Roman street, maybe dodged a runaway cart or two, and you're standing at the counter of a thermopolium, the air thick with the scent of simmering pots, and something vaguely fishy pulling you in. Forget the sterile fluorescent lighting of your local drive-thru. This place is all raw energy, firelight, and the clatter of earthenware. You're not just here for a meal. You're here for the experience, the human connection, and frankly, because your stomach is doing an impression of a collapsing amphitheater. But what exactly are you ordering? It's not like they have a laminated menu with calorie counts and allergy warnings. The menu at a thermopolium was less about choice and more about what was available, cheap, and could be cooked quickly over an open flame. And thanks to the incredible preservation at places like Pompeii, we don't have to guess. The archaeologists, bless their dusty, patient souls, found the ancient equivalent of restaurant receipts and, even better, the leftovers. Imagine peering into those large built-in dolia, those ceramic jars sunk into the counter. They weren't just for decoration, they were the ancient Roman version of a steam table keeping food warm and ready. One might have held a hearty pulse, which is essentially a thick porridge made from spelt or wheat. Think of it as the ultimate Roman comfort food, cheap, filling, and endlessly adaptable. It could be plain, basic carb delivery system, or jazzed up with vegetables, a bit of meat, or even cheese for those feeling flesh. It was the ancestral cousin to your modern oatmeal, but with a much more robust, earthy flavor and probably less sugar. You could get a steaming bowl of enough to stick to your ribs and fuel a day of hauling marble or debating philosophy in the forum. Next to it, another dolium would likely be brimming with a stew. And not just any stew, but a Roman stew, which means it almost certainly featured garum. Ah, garum. If you've never heard of it, prepare for a sensory journey. This fermented fish sauce was the ketchup, the Worcestershire, and the umami bomb of the Roman world, all rolled into one. It was made from fish guts, salt, and thyme, left to ferment in the sun until it transformed into a pungent, savory liquid. The smell, even today, is distinctive. It permeated everything. If you closed your eyes, you'd probably smell it clinging to the very bricks of Rome. And in this stew, it would have added a deep, complex flavor to whatever ingredients were on hand. Lentils, chickpeas, maybe some cabbage or onions, and often small pieces of meat. Speaking of meat, the thermopolium wasn't serving prime rib. You're more likely to find cuts of pork, often cured or roasted, perhaps some chicken, or even wild game if the hunter had a good day. Bones found in the drains and middens of these establishments tell a clear story. The Romans were eating their fair share of domesticated animals. Small birds, too, like thrushes, were a popular snack, a tiny, flavorful morsel for a quick bite. They might be roasted on skewers, much like ancient kebabs, offering a satisfying, greasy crunch. You could grab a handful hot from the coals, the juices dripping down your chin as you leaned against the counter, observing the street life. It's not elegant dining, but it's satisfyingly primal. And fish, of course. For a city like Pompeii, relatively close to the coast, fresh fish would have been available. But for many thermopolia, especially those further inland, salted or smoked fish was the staple. Think dried cod or a small preserved fish that could be rehydrated and added to a stew or simply eaten with bread. It provided essential protein. And when combined with garum, it amplified that rich, savory flavor profile the Romans adored. To accompany your hearty meal, you'd need something to drink. Water was always an option, readily available from public fountains, but for many, especially after a long day's work, wine was the preferred choice. Roman wine, however, was rarely consumed neat. It was almost always diluted with water, sometimes heated, sometimes chilled, with snow from Vesuvius, and often flavored with honey or spices. It was less about getting roaring drunk and more about hydration, taste, and a gentle buzz. You'd be handed a cup, perhaps a simple ceramic mug, and you'd sip your watered wine, letting the warmth spread through you. It was a social lubricant, a taste enhancer, and a safer alternative to questionable tap water in many places. And for the truly frugal, or those who needed a pick-me-up after strenuous labor, there was posca, a refreshing, slightly acidic drink made from water and vinegar, occasionally flavored with herbs. Think of it as the ancient Roman Gatorade, but with a tangier, more robust personality. Then there were the smaller, supplemental items. Carbonized remains from Pompeii have revealed evidence of lentils, chickpeas, and even nuts like walnuts and hazelnuts. These would have been available as quick snacks, perhaps roasted or added to the pulls and stews for extra texture and nutrition. Fruits, 2 figs, dates, and grapes, often dried to preserve them, would have provided a touch of sweetness and energy. They might have been sold by vendors outside, but often found their way onto the thermopolium counter as an easy add-on. Imagine biting into a dried fig. Its chewy sweetness a stark contrast to the savory stew you just devoured. The cooking itself was practical and efficient. Large bronze or iron cauldrons would have hung over open fires, simmering away for hours. Flat griddles would have been used for baking flatbreads or searing small pieces of meat. It was an assembly line of ancient convenience, designed to feed hungry Romans quickly and affordably. You weren't waiting for a chef to meticulously plate your meal. You were getting a generous scoop of whatever was hot and ready. The efficiency was key, reflecting the fast-paced life of a bustling Roman city. So as you stand there, perhaps a bit overwhelmed by the sensory tapestry of the thermopolium, you realize this isn't just about food. It's about accessibility. It's about community. It's about a place where the rich and poor could rub shoulders, even if only for a moment. United by the universal human need for a quick, satisfying meal. It's the ancient equivalent of a bustling diner, a food truck park, and a local pub all rolled into one, serving up honest, hearty fare. But beyond the menu itself, the thermopolium offered something even more profound about Roman life. It wasn't just what they ate, but how they ate it, and what that tells us about their social fabric. And that, my curious friend, is where our next discovery truly begins to simmer. Chapter 4. A social hub who ate what and why. You've just been reminded that even in ancient Pompeii, the concept of a quick, unpretentious meal was alive and well. You've seen the counter, imagined the steaming pots, and perhaps even smelled the strong tang of garum wafting from the serving dishes. But who exactly were your fellow diners? Who frequented these bustling Roman fast food joints? And what did their presence tell us about the surprisingly diverse social fabric of a city that, for all its grandeur, was profoundly human in its daily rhythms? Tonight, you are a busy artisan in Pompeii, perhaps a skilled potter, or a weaver living in an insula, one of those multi-story apartment blocks that were, let's be honest, less a cozy home and more a vertical stack of individual life-size sardine cans. Your tiny apartment, probably up 3 flights of creaking wooden stairs, has no kitchen, or rather, it has a charcoal brazier, which, while capable of heating a pot of lentils, isn't exactly suited for a grand culinary undertaking. And frankly, after a long morning of shaping clay or mending nets, the thought of wrestling with a smoky fire and a dull knife is about as appealing as an undiluted glass of ancient Roman wine on an empty stomach. So you find yourself quite naturally gravitating towards the nearest thermopolium. As you step inside, the air is thick with the murmur of voices, the clatter of ceramic bowls, and a symphony of aromas. It's a sensory overload, a far cry from the quiet hum of your workshop. You glance around, and the crowd is a tapestry of Roman life. There are laborers, their hands still calloused from the docks or the construction sites, sharing a cheap bowl of stew. Slaves, sent by their masters with a handful of coins and a specific order, patiently wait their turn. You see merchants, perhaps haggling over the price of a fish stew, their faces ruddy from a day spent hawking wares in the forum. And yes, you even spot a few individuals who, by their finer tunic and more composed demeanor, clearly belong to the wealthier classes. They're here not out of necessity, but perhaps for the novelty, or simply because they crave a quick, informal bite away from the stuffy confines of their own dining rooms. It's the ancient Roman equivalent of a CEO popping into a food truck for a gourmet hot dog, a rare but not unheard of sight. The social dynamic here is fascinating, isn't it? The thermopolium was a great equalizer, a place where the lines of Roman class blurred, if only for the duration of a quick meal. No formal dining couches here, no elaborate rituals, just people, hungry people, standing or sitting on simple stools, eating from common bowls. It's a vivid snapshot of daily life, stripped of its usual pomp and circumstance. Think of it as the ultimate ancient Roman water cooler, a place where gossip flowed as freely as the wine, where news of the latest chariot race mingled with complaints about the price of bread. It's where you could bump into anyone, from the lowliest slave to a surprisingly well-heeled merchant, all united by the universal human need for sustenance and a bit of human connection. So what exactly are you contemplating for your midday meal? The counter, often adorned with colorful frescoes depicting food and drink perhaps. A rooster or a bowl of fruit. A subtle advertisement displays the day's offerings. It's not a Michelin star menu, but it's hearty and practical. You might opt for a bowl of pulse, a thick porridge made from spelt, which was a staple of the Roman diet. It's simple, filling, and incredibly cheap. Or perhaps you're feeling a bit more adventurous. The archaeological evidence from Pompey's Thermopylae has been incredibly generous, revealing the carbonized remains of actual meals. We found evidence of lentils, fava beans, and chickpeas, often stewed together with various herbs and spices. There were also plenty of fish dishes. Given Pompey's coastal location, small fried fish, perhaps seasoned with a generous dash of garum, would have been a common sight and smell. Imagine the salty, umami explosion. Meat, while not as ubiquitous as legumes or grains, also made an appearance. We found bones from pigs, cattle, and even ducks and chickens. Often, these would have been prepared as stews or sausages, practical for fast service and ensuring every part of the animal was utilized. Picture yourself biting into a savory sausage, seasoned with fennel and pepper, wrapped in a piece of fresh, crusty bread. It's a far cry from the bland diets often portrayed in historical dramas, isn't it? And speaking of bread, it was of course everywhere. Small, round loaves, often scored to be easily broken into portions, with a perfect accompaniment to soak up every last drop of your stew, and to wash it all down. Wine, naturally, but not the fine, aged vintages enjoyed by the elite at lavish banquets. This was often cheaper, local wine, frequently diluted with water. It was served warm or cool, depending on the season and the Thermopolium's facilities. You might also find posca, a refreshing drink made from water, vinegar, and sometimes herbs. The ancient Roman equivalent of an energy drink for the working class. It was hydrating, cheap, and probably tasted a bit like a tangy, herbaceous sports drink. You might even spot a vendor selling fresh fruit figs, grapes, dates, or nuts for a quick, healthy snack on the go. The Thermopolium, therefore, wasn't just a place to grab a bite. It was an integral part of the urban ecosystem. It solved a fundamental problem for a large segment of the population: how to eat. A hot, prepared meal when you lack the means or space to cook for yourself. It was convenience culture, perfected 2 millennia before the invention of the microwave. It was also a critical social safety net, providing affordable sustenance to those who needed it most. But beyond mere survival, it fostered a unique sense of community. It was a place for informal gatherings, for exchanging pleasantries, for unwinding after a long day. It was the ancient Roman version of your local pub, your coffee shop, and your favorite takeout joint, all rolled into one bustling, aromatic establishment. This constant ebb and flow of people, this lively mix of classes and conversations, paint a picture of Roman life that was far more dynamic and interconnected than we often imagine. It reminds us that despite the passage of centuries, the simple human desire for good food, good company, and a moment of respite remains wonderfully unchanged. And as you finish your meal, perhaps a hearty bowl of chickpea stew, you realize that these humble eateries were more than just kitchens. They were the very heartbeat of the city. But what other secrets did the ancient fast food counters hold? What unexpected truths about Roman life were etched into their very walls, just waiting for us to uncover? Chapter 5. Behind the counter running an ancient Roman eatery tonight, you are not a casual diner merely strolling past the enticing aromas of Roman street food. No, tonight you are the aroma, or rather, the person responsible for it. You are the proprietor of a bustling Thermopolium, a purveyor of ancient Roman fast food, and your day begins long before the first rays of Apollo touch the forum. The air in your small establishment, still cool and damp from the night, smells faintly of stale wine, yesterday's fish stew, and the ever-present earthiness of Pompeii itself. You've just wrestled open the heavy wooden shutters, a daily struggle against warped hinges and the stubborn spirit of inanimate objects. Probably not unlike trying to open a jar of pickles that's been sealed since the last ice age. As the first hints of dawn paint Vesuvius in muted purples and grays, you survey your domain. It's not much, but it's yours. The main counter, made of sturdy masonry, gleams faintly with the residue of countless meals and hurried wipes. Embedded into its surface are the dolia, those deep, cavernous terracotta jars ready to be filled with the day's offering. They're like ancient slow cookers, keeping food warm for hours, though perhaps with a little less digital precision and a lot more concern about things crawling in. Behind the counter, The small, smoky kitchen area is already stirring. A low fire crackles under a tripod, warming a large pot of water, essential for everything from washing hands occasionally to diluting wine always. Your staff, if you can call them that, consists of a freedman named Lucius, who grumbles more than a broken cartwheel, and a young slave boy, Marcus, whose primary skill seems to be disappearing just when you need him most. Lucius is already chopping vegetables with a blunt iron knife, the rhythmic thud a familiar soundtrack to your morning. You often wonder if he sharpens it with his teeth, given the sound. Marcus, meanwhile, is tasked with fetching fresh water from the nearby public fountain, a journey that usually takes twice as long as necessary, probably due to an intense fascination with stray dogs or particularly interesting pebbles. You sigh, but it's a familiar sigh, one born of exasperation mixed with the understanding that this is simply the rhythm of life in a Roman eatery. No HR departments here. Just the immediate threat of your glare. The real work begins with the food itself. Today's special, you've decided, will be a hearty lentil stew, thick enough to stand a spoon in season, with a generous dollop of garum. That ubiquitous fermented fish sauce that Romans adored. Think of it as ancient ketchup, but with a flavor profile that would make a modern palate either recoil in horror or demand more. You personally oversee the stirring of the stew, ensuring it does. Tea stick to the bottom of the pot. An ancient culinary catastrophe. Other dolia are filled with simmering chickpeas, perhaps some salt, fish, and of course, a fresh batch of pulse, a simple grain porridge. That's the Roman equivalent of comfort food. If your idea of comfort involves something that tastes suspiciously like gruel, on the counter, you arrange baskets of fresh bread, still warm from the baker down the street, and a selection of dried fruits and nuts for those with a sweeter tooth, or a more immediate need for sustenance. The smell of baking bread, even if it's not from your own oven, is always a good draw. Soon, the street outside begins to hum with activity. The first customers aren't the leisure seekers, but the early risers, the dock workers heading to the port, the vendors setting up their stalls, the slaves on errands for their masters. They're looking for a quick, hot meal to fuel their day, some that doesn't require a sit-down affair or the formality of a dining couch. You greet them with a practiced smile, a mix of genuine hospitality and the knowledge that every coin counts. Salve, you call out, a little louder than necessary, just to make sure they know you're open for business. One fellow, a burly stevedore named Quintus, asks for a large bowl of lentil stew and a splash of undiluted wine, a bold choice for this early hour. But then again, Quintus's life probably requires a certain level of internal lubrication. You ladle out the stew, the steam rising in fragrant clouds, and pour the wine from a ceramic jug, the liquid glugging merrily. The coins clink into your small wooden box, a satisfying sound that speaks of survival, and, dare you dream, a modest profit. It's a cash-only operation, of course. No complex credit systems here. Just the immediate exchange of goods for bronze or silver. You have to be shrewd, though. Some customers try to haggle. Others try to sneak an extra piece of bread. You've developed an eagle eye for such shenanigans, a skill honed over years of dealing with the perpetually hungry and occasionally opportunistic citizens of Pompeii. Lucius, bless his grumpy heart, is surprisingly good at spotting a short changer. Probably because he's tried every trick in the book himself. You make a mental note of inventory, how much bread is left, how quickly the stew is disappearing. Running a thermopolium isn't just cooking, it's a constant calculation, a delicate balance between supply and demand, all conducted in a cloud of steam and the din of street life. Hygiene, you've learned, is a relative concept. While you try to keep the counter wiped down and the water for washing hands is certainly warm, the reality of ancient life means flies are a constant annoyance, and dust from the unpaved streets settles everywhere. You politely ignore the occasional crumb that falls onto the ground, knowing that the street dogs will handle it soon enough. There's a certain rugged practicality to it all. Nobody expects sterile conditions. They expect hot food that's reasonably edible and won't immediately send them to the underworld, and you deliver. The heat from the cooking fires, especially in the summer months, makes the small kitchen a veritable inferno, but you've grown accustomed to it. Sweat drips, but the food keeps cooking, and the customers keep coming. As the afternoon wears on, the pace slows slightly. You might have a moment to sit on a low stool behind the counter, perhaps nibble on a piece of bread yourself, or share a joke with a regular customer. This is when the thermopolium becomes more than just a place to grab a quick bite. It becomes a social hub, a place where news is exchanged, rumors are spread, and the daily dramas of Pompeii unfold. You hear about the latest gladiatorial games, the scandalous affair of a local senator, or the latest price of olives. You're not just serving food. You're serving as an unofficial town crier, a silent observer of the human comedy. Finally, as evening approaches and the shadows lengthen, the last few customers trickle out. Lucius begins the arduous task of scrubbing the dolia, grumbling all the while Marcus, miraculously reappearing, helps with the sweeping. You count the day's earnings, a small pile of coins that represents another day survived, another day fed. The scent of cooking food slowly fades, replaced by the cooler, cleaner smell of damp earth and coming night. You pull the heavy shutters closed, plunging the thermopolium into darkness once more. It's an exhausting life, full of smoke, sweat, and endless demands. But as you lock the door, there's a quiet satisfaction. You fed the city one bowl of stew and one cup of wine at a time. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again, ready to face the Roman equivalent of the breakfast rush. Chapter 6. Ancient Bites. Modern echoes the enduring legacy of fast food as the embers of our ancient culinary journey begin to cool. We find ourselves drifting back to the bustling, vibrant streets of Pompeii. You, the Roman citizen we've been accompanying, might be wiping the last crumbs of a lentil stew from your chin. Or perhaps a lingering scent of spiced wine still dances in your nostrils. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the mosaic floors and painted frescoes of the thermopolium you just frequented. The noise of the day begins to soften, replaced by the gentle murmur of evening conversations and the distant bleating of a goat. What we've learned tonight, through these remarkably preserved snapshots of Roman life, isn't just about ancient menus or counter designs. It's about something far more fundamental. Something that echoes through the ages and resonates with our own lives in ways that might surprise you. Because let's be honest, the very human impulse that drove Romans to the thermopolium isn't so different from what drives us to a drive-thru today. It's the need for convenience, the desire for a quick, hot meal when you are too busy, or too tired, or perhaps just too uninspired to cook. Think about it, you, a Roman artisan, finishing a long day in your workshop, covered in marble dust, or the smell of cured leather. Do you really want to go home and start chopping vegetables for an elaborate meal? Or would you rather grab a piping hot bowl of poles, a hearty porridge, perhaps with some seasoned meat or vegetables, from a place that's already done all the work? It's the ancient equivalent of deciding between spending an hour in the kitchen after a grueling commute or picking up a ready-made dinner that hits the spot. The choice, then as now, often comes down to precious time and the simple appeal of instant gratification. These thermopolia weren't just about food, they were social hubs. Imagine you're a Roman merchant striking a deal and needing a quick, neutral spot to discuss terms, or perhaps you're simply meeting a friend, perhaps a lover, for a discreet chat over a warm drink, away from the prying ears of you. Household. They offered a public space that wasn't a grand bathhouse or a formal temple, but a casual, accessible spot for everyone. It was the Roman version of grabbing a coffee with a colleague or meeting up at a local diner for a bite and a gossip session. The human need for connection, for a shared moment over food and drink, transcends millennia. And what about the vendors themselves, the people who ran these establishments, meticulously painting their menus on walls, tending to their stoves, and serving up the daily specials? They were entrepreneurs, innovators, working to feed a city, to make a living, to carve out their own place in the bustling Roman economy. Their ingenuity, their understanding of demand, their tireless work ethic, these are qualities we recognize and admire in the small business owners and restaurateurs of our own era. They faced challenges, no doubt, fickle customers, sourcing ingredients, keeping the fires burning, yet they persevered, providing a vital service that shaped the daily rhythm of Roman life. The archaeological evidence from places like Pompeii, frozen in time by Vesuvius's sudden fury, has granted us an unparalleled gift. It stripped away the grand narratives of emperors and legions for a moment, and instead showed us the real, tangible lives of everyday people. It showed us their kitchens, their counters, their preferred dishes, and even the graffiti they scrawled on the walls. The ancient equivalent of a Yelp review, perhaps. These discoveries forced us to confront the idea that history isn't just made by the powerful, but by the collective choices and daily routines of millions, including their choice of where to grab lunch. It reminds us that innovation in food, driven by convenience and changing lifestyles, is not a modern phenomenon. It's a recurring theme in human history, from the earliest street vendors to the Roman thermopylae to the medieval pies sold at markets, and all the way to today's global fast food chains. Humanity has always sought efficient ways to nourish itself and to connect over a meal. The specifics change: a bowl of garum spice something instead of a burger, a terracotta cup of wine instead of a soda, but the underlying human needs remain steadfast. So as we bring our archaeological dig into Roman fast food to a gentle close to none, perhaps you'll look at your next quick meal with a slightly different perspective. You might just see the faint echo of a Roman grabbing a snack from a thermopolium, sharing a laugh with a friend, or simply finding a moment of delicious respite in a busy day. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit, the constant adaptation, and the surprisingly relatable threads that connect us across vast spans of time. The past, it turns out, is not just about grand empires, but about the very human experience of hunger, community, and the simple pleasure of a good, quick bite. As our journey through the surprisingly modern world of Roman thermopolia concludes, tonight we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising, and always intriguing tapestry woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient mystery that still makes us wonder. Until our next archaeological adventure together, this is the Sleeping Archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers. Don't forget to subscribe. And may your rest be filled with wonder at the remarkable tapestry of human history. But for now, stay tuned as we have a bonus story coming right up, read especially for you by our guest narrator.
Bonus Story 2. The Olmec colossal heads who carved them, and why for centuries history books, bless their dusty hearts, painted early civilizations with a rather broad, smudgy brush. Simple folk, right? Barely out of the mud, certainly no match for a decent wheelbarrow, let alone constructing something truly monumental. The official narrative, whispered through academic halls, often implies that unless you had Roman plumbing or Egyptian pyramids, you were basically just winging it in the wilderness. And if you were tucked away in the humid, mosquito-ridden lowlands of ancient Mesoamerica, well, you were probably just trying to keep your sandals from dissolving. We've been fed a rather tidy, linear progression of great civilizations, often ignoring those inconvenient bumps in the timeline, those early innovators who quietly laid the groundwork for everything that came after. Well, tonight, we're going to politely suggest that this view might be a colossal miscalculation. Tonight, you are a master sculptor, not of marble or bronze, but of volcanic basalt, harder than your mother-in-law's stairs and far less forgiving. You live in what we now call San Lorenzo around 1200 BCE, in a civilization just emerging from the swamps of the Gulf Coast. Your hands, calloused and strong, are not shaping delicate figurines. Oh no, you are carving the face of a god-king, a revered ruler whose likeness will tower over generations, a visage so monumental it will be rediscovered millennia later, completely shattering every preconceived notion about your people. And you are doing it all without a single metal tool, without a single wheel, armed only with grit, ingenuity, and a stone more stubborn than a tax auditor. This wasn't just art. It was an act of geological defiance. Imagine a face nearly 10 feet tall, weighing more than a small house, a stoic, powerful expression, wearing a helmet that looks less like headgear and more like a declaration of cosmic authority. This isn't just a statue, it's a receipt, carved in stone, of a sophisticated, powerful culture that existed long before many of the great civilizations we usually drone on about. When the first of these Olmec colossal heads was unearthed, not by archaeologists but by a local farmer in Tres Zapotes in the 1930s, it wasn't just dirt flying. It was centuries of neatly categorized history exploding into a million tiny, bewildered pieces. These were the receipts that proved sophisticated societies didn't just pop up fully formed. This discovery, made in places like San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes, reveals something amazing about the foundational culture of Mesoamerica. As we settle in tonight, we're going to uncover not just what archaeologists found, but what it tells us about the surprisingly relatable lives of people who lived in the humid lowlands of ancient Mexico. But before we begin this journey together, write in the comments where you are listening from. It's fascinating to learn where in the world you are. Also, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights and prepare to discover why this story will change how you think about the very dawn of civilization. Chapter 1. Giants emerging from the earth. Let's rewind the clock, shall we? Not just a few centuries, but to a time so ancient that the pyramids of Egypt were still centuries away from conception. We're talking about roughly 1200 BCE in the steamy verdant lowlands of what is now southern Veracruz and Tabasco in Mexico. This is the heartland of the Olmec, a civilization that for a long time was merely a whisper in the annals of history, a footnote overshadowed by its more famous descendants like the Maya and the Aztecs. But oh, how those whispers grew into a roar once we started digging. And by we, I mean tenacious archaeologists, not your average backyard gardener, because what they found was anything but average. The first tangible hint of this incredible culture didn't come from a dusty scroll or an intricate ruin, but from a gargantuan stone head. In 1862, a man named Jose Melgar y Serrano, a kind of intrepid explorer and adventurer, stumbled upon something extraordinary near the town of Tres Zapotes. It was a massive basalt head, partially buried, its face staring impassively from the earth. Melgar described it as having Ethiopian features, a well-intentioned but clearly misinformed assumption of the time, reflecting the biases of 19th century scholarship. He called it a magnificent sculpture, and he wasn't wrong. It was in fact the first documented Olmec colossal head. But for decades, this discovery remained an isolated anomaly, a historical loose tooth. It wasn't until the 1930s that the real revelation began. An archaeologist named Matthew Sterling, backed by the Smithsonian Institution, started systematic excavations in Tres Zapotes. And what did he find? More colossal heads, of course. It's like finding one antique car and then realizing you've just stumbled upon an entire parking lot full of them. This wasn't just a fluke. It was a pattern. The sheer scale and uniformity of these sculptures, scattered across different sites, hinted at a civilization far more organized and powerful than anyone had previously imagined for such an early period in Mesoamerica. Imagine the utter disbelief, the frantic scribbling in notebooks, the excited whispers echoing through the humid air as these giants slowly emerged from their earthen slumber. These weren't just big rocks with faces, my friends. They were the earliest major sculptural works in Mesoamerica, predating almost everything else by centuries. This immediately positioned the Olmec as something fundamentally different, a kind of mother culture that sprouted from the rich, alluvial soil of the Gulf Coast and profoundly influenced subsequent civilization. Think of them as the original trendsetters, the OG architects of Mesoamerican civilization. They were inventing things, developing ideas, and establishing practices that would resonate for over a millennium. So who were these Olmec people? They were agriculturalists, living in a fertile riverine environment, cultivating maize, beans, and squash. But unlike simple village farmers, they were also master organizers. To create these heads, they needed a hierarchical society, specialized artisans, and a logistical genius that would make modern supply chain managers weep with envy. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving and creating. The human story here is one of astonishing ambition and collective effort. Imagine you are part of that community, living in the shadow of these massive sculpted faces. They weren't just pretty decorations, they were the very embodiment of your rulers, your society's power, your connection to the divine. You'd wake up every morning, and there it would be, staring back at you, a constant, silent reminder of who was in charge and what your people were capable of. And this, my friends, is where the story gets really juicy, because finding these heads was just the first layer of the onion. The sheer size of them immediately begs the question how. How on earth did a civilization without metal tools, without beasts of burden, and without even the humble wheel manage to create, transport, and erect these monumental sculptures? It's a puzzle that even today makes archaeologists scratch their heads, rub their temples, and occasionally reach for a stiff drink. But that, dear listeners, is a mystery we're about to delve into next. Get comfortable, because the journey of these stones is truly unbelievable. Chapter 2. The Herculean haul of the basalt. All right, let's talk logistics, because honestly, once you get past the initial wow, big head reaction, the next thought that inevitably slaps you across the face is, how did they do that? We're not talking about carving a little garden gnome here. We're talking about massive blocks of basalt. Volcanic rock, which for those of you who aren't geologists, is incredibly dense and incredibly tough. If you try to chip away at it with your average hammer, you just get a sore arm and a very frustrated expression. These heads, as we've mentioned, can weigh anywhere from 6 to 50 tons. That's like moving a small bus or a very, very grumpy elephant without the benefit of, well, anything remotely resembling modern engineering. So tonight, you, our intrepid ancient sculptor, are also a bit of a logistics expert. Your first challenge, getting the stone. The Olmec heartland, fertile as it was, didn't have readily available basalt. The nearest known quarries were in the Tuxtla Mountains, sometimes over 60 miles away from the major Olmec centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta. 60 miles, over swamps, through rivers, across uneven terrain, no trucks, no cranes, no power tools. This wasn't a quick trip to Home Depot. This was an epic quest just to acquire the raw material. Imagine you're standing at the quarry face, the humid air thick with the smell of sweat and dust. Your tools are rudimentary, harder stone hammerstones, probably made of dolerite, used for pecking and shaping. You're not cutting, you're effectively bruising the rock into submission, slowly, painstakingly, breaking off chunks until you get a workable block. You're part of a massive team, dozens, maybe hundreds of laborers, all coordinated, all working under the blazing sun, slowly liberating these enormous boulders from the mountain. It's rhythmic, back-breaking work, punctuated by the dull thud of stone on stone. Every single head represents an incredible expenditure of human energy, a testament to collective will and the power of leadership. Once the block was freed, the real fun began. Transport. Theories abound, and frankly, they all sound like something out of a particularly ambitious ancient reality show. One popular idea involves creating a kind of colossal sled, placing the massive stone on top, and then dragging it over greased log rollers. Think of it like a prehistoric game of Jenga, but with stakes that involve a lot more sweat and a very real risk of crushing your foot. And then, when you hit a river, which was often you'd need to somehow load this multi-ton behemoth onto giant rafts made of multiple logs. Imagine trying to balance a small apartment building on a few wooden pontoons, and then navigating it down a winding, current-filled waterway. Consider the sheer organizational skill required. Someone had to manage all these people, the quarrymen, the movers, the raftsmen. Someone had to ensure they were fed, that their tools were maintained, that the logistics of this incredible journey were meticulously planned. This wasn't just brute force, it was applied physics, a deep understanding of leverage, friction, and buoyancy. These were people who understood their environment intimately, using the natural waterway to their advantage, harnessing human power in ways we often struggle to comprehend today. It challenges that old assumption, doesn't it? The one about simple ancient people. There was nothing simple about this. You, our dedicated sculptor-mover, would have been intimately familiar with every bump, bruise on that stone, every river crossing, every moment of triumph and near disaster. It's a profound connection to the material, knowing where it came from, and the effort it took to bring it to its ultimate destination. And only then, only after this monumental journey, could the true artistry begin. The shaping of a face that would stare across centuries. So if you thought getting your new refrigerator delivered was a hassle, just imagine coordinating a 50-ton basalt delivery in 1200 BCE. It truly puts things into perspective, doesn't it? But what secrets do these faces hold? That's the next fascinating question. Chapter 3. Faces of authority, so you've somehow managed to wrangle a 50-ton block of basalt from a mountain range 60 miles away, dragged it through swamps, and floated it down rivers. Congratulations, you've just done the archaeological equivalent of building the Hoover Dam with a spoon. Now the real artistry begins. As our ancient sculptor, you now face the task of transforming this colossal lump of volcanic rock into a living, breathing representation of power. And this, my friends, is where the Olmec really flex their artistic muscles. When you look at the Olmec colossal heads, one of the first things you notice is their striking individuality. While they share a certain stylistic uniformity, each head possesses unique facial features, expressions, and, crucially, distinct helmets or headgear. It's as if you're looking at a lineup of powerful individuals captured in stone. This immediately sparked a theory. These weren't generic deities or abstract concepts. These were portraits of actual rulers, powerful individuals who held sway over the early Olmec centers. Imagine your leaders being immortalized in such a way, their faces becoming the enduring symbols of their reign. The craftsmanship is astonishing. Remember, you're still using those harder stone hammerstones for pecking and shaping, and probably abrasive sands and gourds for polishing. It's a slow, deliberate process of reducing the stone, revealing the face within. Think of it like an incredibly challenging game of subtraction, where every chip, every scrape, every polishing stroke counts. You're carving eyes that convey wisdom, lips that suggest authority, and cheeks that speak of a life lived in leadership. The sensory detail of this work would have been constant. The gritty feel of basalt dust on your skin, the rhythmic tapping of hammerstone on stone, the gradual revelation of the features under your skilled hands. Now let's talk about the helmets. These aren't just fashion statements, they're incredibly distinctive, often adorned with elaborate ear flaps, chin straps, and unique emblems. Some scholars suggest the helmets might represent protective gear worn during the Mesoamerican ball game, a ritualistic sport that held immense cultural and religious significance. If so, these rulers were not just political leaders, but also perhaps ritual athletes, embodying both temporal and spiritual power. Others see them as elaborate ceremonial regalia signifying rank and divine connection. Each head, with its specific helmet, might have been a subtle declaration of that ruler's lineage, achievements, or even a particular moment in their reign. Consider the implications of these portraits in a society that didn't have written records in the way we understand them. These colossal heads served as enduring monuments to leadership. They were visual history, broadcasting the power and authority of the ruling elite to everyone in the community and potentially to neighboring groups. They solidified the social structure, reminding everyone of the established order. This wasn't just about showing off, it was about maintaining stability and projecting strength in a nascent civilization. And here's where we connect to universal human experience. What leader throughout history hasn't wanted to leave a lasting mark, to have their image endure? From Roman emperors to modern political figures, the desire for a legacy, for recognition, is a powerful motivator. The Olmec rulers were no different. They just went about it with a significantly more dramatic and labor-intensive approach. These heads were their selfies, their monuments, their eternal social media profiles. You, the sculptor, were instrumental in shaping that legacy, in literally carving history. But what happens when that power shifts, or when a dynasty falls? What then becomes of these imposing stone faces? Prepare yourself, because not all legacies are preserved in pristine condition. Chapter 4. The Vanishing and the Vandalized. Our journey with the Olmec colossal heads takes a curious and sometimes unsettling turn in this chapter. You've brought the stone, you've carved the face of a revered leader, a symbol of enduring power. But what happens when that power isn't so enduring? What happens when a ruler falls, or an entire civilization undergoes a profound transformation? The story of the Olmec heads doesn't end with their erection. For many, it includes their deliberate defacement, destruction, or burial. It's like finding a series of ancient monuments only to discover that some of them have been ritualistically killed or put to rest. Of the 17 colossal heads discovered so far across the major Olmec sites, many show clear evidence of intentional damage. Noses are broken, sections of the faces are chipped away sometimes, entire heads are overturned and buried or rolled into ravines. This wasn't the slow erosion of time, this was an active, deliberate act. Imagine the scene. The rhythmic chipping of your carving tools replaced by the destructive thud of other stones, intentionally marring the very features you meticulously brought to life. It's a poignant testament to the transient nature of power, even when carved in basalt. So why would anyone destroy or deface such incredible works of art? Archaeologists have put forth several compelling theories. One prominent idea is that the killing of the heads was a ritualistic act performed upon the death of the ruler they represented. In many ancient cultures, objects associated with a deceased leader were symbolically killed to release their spirit or energy, preventing it from lingering or being misused. This act would have marked the end of an era, a transition of power, a powerful symbolic closure for the community. The ruler's physical body might be gone, but their stone spirit still required a final, respectful dismantling. Another theory suggests a far more tumultuous explanation: political overthrow. Imagine a new ruler, or a rival faction seizing control. What better way to assert dominance and erase the memory of the previous regime than to deface or destroy its most powerful symbols? It's a very human response to a change in power seen throughout history. When one dynasty falls, the monuments of its predecessors often become targets, symbols to be toppled and buried to legitimize the new order. The deliberate burial of some heads could also be a way to retire them, to place them out of sight, but perhaps not entirely out of mind, ready for a potential future re-emergence. Some heads were even recarved. We see evidence of some heads being reworked into new sculptures, or perhaps even into new colossal heads with different features. This speaks to a remarkable pragmatism, a willingness to reuse valuable material rather than simply discard it. It's an ancient form of recycling, driven by the immense effort it took to procure the original stone. Imagine the sheer audacity of taking a finished portrait of a powerful ruler and reshaping it, perhaps into the likeness of their successor. This would be a profound act of reinterpretation, a rewriting of history in stone. These acts of defacement, burial, and recarving provide us with incredibly rich insights into the dynamics of Olmec society. They suggest not just a capacity for monumental creation, but also a complex understanding of power, ritual, and societal change. They reveal that even the most impressive monuments are not immune to the ebb and flow of human ambition and belief. For you, the ancient sculptor, witnessing the destruction or transformation of your life, this work would have been a stark reminder of the impermanence of even the hardest stone. But even with these dramatic acts, the Olmec legacy was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to cast its colossal shadow across the entirety of Mesoamerica. Chapter 5. The Olmec's enduring blueprint as the colossal heads were defaced, buried, or repurposed. The Olmec civilization itself eventually faded. By around 400 BCE, the major Olmec centers like San Lorenzo and Levanta were largely abandoned. Their monumental works left to be slowly swallowed by the encroaching jungle. But like a powerful river carving its path through the landscape, the Olmec didn't truly disappear. Instead, their innovations, their cultural blueprint, flowed outwards, profoundly shaping the civilizations that would follow. They were, in essence, the cultural wellspring from which much of Mesoamerican identity would later drink. Tonight, consider yourself an intellectual heir to the Olmec. inheriting their genius. We're talking about foundational concepts that reverberated for centuries across different cultures. Take, for instance, the Mesoamerican calendar. The Olmec were likely instrumental in developing early calendrical systems, crucial for agriculture, rituals, and tracking time. We see early forms of the long count calendar, later perfected by the Maya, which allowed for astronomical precision and a deep understanding of cyclical time. Imagine trying to coordinate a society, plant crops, and plan ceremonies without a reliable calendar. It's like trying to run a business without a clock, or a schedule pure chaos. Then there's writing. While Olmec writing is still being deciphered and debated, there's compelling evidence of early glyphic systems, the ancestors of the elaborate writing of the Maya and the Aztecs. The famous Cascajal block, discovered in 2006, presents 62 glyphs that appear to be a distinct writing system, making it the earliest known writing in the Americas. This means the Olmec were not just carving faces, they were potentially carving words, recording their history, their rituals, their knowledge. You, our ancient artisan, might have even dabbled in these early forms of symbolic communication, translating ideas into tangible form. The iconic Mesoamerican ball game, a ritualistic and often deadly sport played with a rubber ball, also finds its roots in Olmec culture. Early ball courts and rubber balls dating back to Olmec times have been found. This wasn't just a game, it was a deeply symbolic contest, often linked to cosmology, sacrifice, and the cycle of life and death. The Olmec established the framework for this pervasive cultural practice, which would be adopted and elaborated upon by virtually every subsequent major civilization in the region. And the iconography, the jaguar motif, for instance, a powerful and revered creature in Mesoamerican cosmology, is prominent in Olmec art and continued to be a central figure in Maya and Aztec religious imagery. The concept of the word jaguar, a mythical half-human, half-jaguar creature, is a hallmark of Olmec art, representing potent divine power. Even the practice of jade carving, highly prized throughout Mesoamerica for its beauty and spiritual significance, reached an early peak with the Olmec. They understood the properties of the stone, the arduous process of working it, and its profound symbolic value. These enduring influences demonstrate that the Olmec were not simply an isolated early civilization. They were a vibrant, innovative hub, a true mother culture that provided the conceptual and artistic framework for much of what we recognize as distinctly Mesoamerican. Their political structures, their religious beliefs, their artistic styles, and their scientific understanding became the bedrock for empires that would rise and fall for millennia after the last Olmec colossal head was carved. The remaining mysteries, of course, are tantalizing. What other secrets lie beneath the dense jungle canopy? What further connections await discovery? The archaeological adventure continues, forever expanding our understanding of this truly foundational people. Chapter 6, The Unsleeping Echoes of Power, as our journey through the enigmatic world of the Olmec colossal heads concludes tonight. We return to you, our ancient sculptor, you who painstakingly moved mountains of basalt, who patiently coaxed expressions of power from the hardest stone. Your hands shaped not just rock but an enduring legacy. You were part of something monumental, a civilization that, against all odds, defied the limitations of its era and carved its place indelibly into the fabric of human history. Your work, the faces of your rulers, speak to a universal human impulse, the desire to leave a mark, to project authority, to connect with the divine, and to be remembered. These Olmec heads are more than just archaeological finds. They are testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the sheer force of will. They remind us that sophistication isn't always about metal tools or wheeled vehicles. Sometimes it's about coordinated effort, deep knowledge of your environment, and an unshakable vision. Imagine the conversations, the debates, the triumphs, and setbacks that accompanied the creation of each one of those magnificent pieces. It was a communal effort, a reflection of an entire society's dedication. These silent giants, now scattered across museums and archaeological sites, stand as eternal sentinels of a profound truth. Civilization didn't just appear in a few select places. It bloomed in diverse corners of the world, often in unexpected ways, driven by the same human desires for order, meaning, and a connection to something larger than themselves. The Olmec, with their colossal heads, carved a powerful narrative that continues to challenge our assumptions and deepen our appreciation for the rich tapestry of human achievement. They remind us that history is often less about the great empires we learned about in school and more about the interconnected, surprising, and often profoundly subtle contributions of countless cultures, each building upon the last. Their legacy is an unsleeping echo, a whisper across millennia that speaks of artistry, ambition, and the enduring power of human endeavor. It's a story that continues to evolve with every new discovery, every reinterpretation, every moment an archaeologist brushes away another layer of soil to reveal a forgotten truth. The Olmec heads, stoic and powerful, remind us that true greatness can be found not just in the size of an empire, but in the audacity of its imagination and the dedication of its people. As our journey through the remarkable story of the Olmec colossal heads concludes, tonight we're reminded that the past is far from dusty and dull. It's a vibrant, often surprising and always intriguing tapestry woven with human ingenuity, resilience, and the occasional ancient mystery that still makes us wonder. Until our next archaeological adventure together, this is the Sleeping Archaeologist, encouraging you to remain curious about the incredible tales still waiting to be discovered beneath our feet. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers. Don't forget to subscribe, and may your rest be filled with wonder at the remarkable tapestry of human history. But for now, stay tuned as we have a bonus story coming right up, read especially for you by our guest narrator. But what of the secrets still lingering, trapped beneath layers of jungle soil and millennia of silence? The 17 colossal heads we know about are undoubtedly spectacular, but they represent only a fraction of what likely existed and perhaps what still lies undiscovered. Imagine the humid, verdant expanse of the Olmec heartland, a landscape so rich in life that it quickly reclaims anything man-made, swallowing cities whole, burying monuments with astonishing speed. For every head unearthed, how many more patiently await the archaeologist's trowel, their stone eyes still staring into the eternal darkness of the earth? The challenges of discovering and excavating sites in such an environment are immense: dense vegetation, the constant battle against humidity and insects, the sheer scale of the territory. It's an ongoing treasure hunt, a patient dance between human curiosity and nature's stubborn embrace. And with every new technological advance, like the use of LIDAR, light detection, and ranging that can map ancient structures hidden beneath the forest canopy, we gain new eyes, new ways of peering into that green oblivion, hinting at yet more colossal echoes waiting to be heard. Think back to your ancient sculptor. Your hands, though skilled, were guided by a deeper understanding of the world, a cosmology that saw divinity in the natural elements, in the powerful jaguar, in the fertile earth itself. These heads weren't just effigies of rulers, they were imbued with spirit and anima. They were conduits between the earthly realm and the celestial, ensuring the prosperity of the community, the success of the harvest, the continuity of their world. When you place those final polishing strokes on a ruler's cheek, you weren't just finishing a sculpture, you were breathing life into stone, entrusting it with a sacred purpose. The very act of carving was itself a ritual, a profound connection to the material and the divine power it would embody. The expressions on these faces, often described as brooding or stoic, might not be distant disinterest, but rather an intense focus, an embodiment of the sacred duty and authority of a leader who stood as intermediary for their people. This deeper connection is what truly made the Olmec blueprint so enduring. It wasn't just about the mechanics of building or writing. It was about a holistic worldview, a way of understanding and interacting with the cosmos that permeated every aspect of their existence. The Olmec created a pantheon of deities, often zoomorphic animal forms blended with human, that would populate the spiritual landscapes of future Mesoamerican civilization. Their rain god, for instance, a fanged, downturned-mouthed deity, is strikingly similar to later manifestations in Maya and Aztec cultures. This shared spiritual grammar, these common metaphors for the sacred, truly highlight the Olmec's role as the intellectual and spiritual ancestors. Imagine growing up in an Olmec village, surrounded by these colossal heads, but smaller jade carvings of jaguar-like creatures, by altars depicting rituals. Your entire world, your entire understanding of life and death would be shaped by this pervasive symbolic language. And what about the lives of those without the colossal heads carved in their likeness? The majority of the Olmec people, the farmers who cultivated the maize and beans, the fisherfolk who harvested the rivers, the families who built the villages and supported these monumental endeavors, their lives, while perhaps not immortalized in basalt, were just as crucial. They were the muscle, the community, the social glue that allowed such ambitious projects to succeed. It required an immense degree of social cohesion and centralized authority to mobilize hundreds, if not thousands, of people for quarrying, moving, feeding, and carving. This wasn't a society of isolated individuals. It was a complex, interconnected web where everyone had a role, from the lowliest laborer to the most revered shaman, all contributing to a collective vision. And that vision, anchored by the presence of these magnificent stone faces, was one of power, order, and connection to the sacred. Consider for a moment the very air of an Olmec city center. The smell of wood smoke from cooking fires, the distant calls of jungle birds, the chatter of market activity perhaps, the rhythmic thud of a stone drum during a ceremony, and always towering over it all, the silent presence of the colossal heads. These weren't hidden away, they were central features, positioned in plazas overlooking residences, asserting their presence in the daily lives of the people. They were part of the very fabric of the landscape, both natural and man-made. They served not only as political statements, but as spiritual anchors, physical manifestations of the unseen forces that governed their world, and in turn, these heads, through their sheer presence, reinforced the structure of Olmec society, reminding everyone of the authority of the rulers and the shared destiny of the community. The mystery of their specific identities, however, remains largely unsolved. While we theorize they are portraits, we don't have accompanying text that says, "This is King so-and-so, the 10th of Blah." This absence of definitive labels only adds to their allure. It forces us to engage with them purely on their visual terms, to project our own questions onto their impassive faces. Are we seeing a particular frown of a strong leader? A scar from an ancient battle? The distinctive features of a specific lineage? Each colossal head invites contemplation, a silent dialogue across the millennia, asking us to reconstruct their stories without the benefit of a written biography. This is the enduring puzzle, the unspoken narrative that makes each encounter with an Olmec head a deeply personal and thought-provoking experience. And what of the later civilization? The Maya, with their soaring pyramids and intricate glyphs. The Aztecs, with their vast empire and complex religious rituals. They didn't start from scratch. They inherited a rich tapestry of ideas, technologies, and artistic conventions woven by the Olmec. The very concept of monumental architecture, the structured urban planning, the understanding of celestial cycles, the veneration of specific deities, the ritual ball game, all these threads can be traced back to the innovative cultural explosion that was the Olmec civilization. They were the intellectual bedrock, the artistic pioneers who dared to dream big, to envision a complex society in the heart of the humid lowlands. The colossal heads are just the most striking manifestation of this foundational genius. Visible proof of a civilization that didn't just survive, but thrived and shaped an entire cultural sphere for millennia to come. So when we look at these ancient faces today, thousands of years removed from their creation, we're not just observing archaeological artifacts. We are witnessing the very dawn of a distinct cultural tradition, a blueprint for sophisticated societies in the Americas. We are seeing the profound ambition of early human communities, their capacity for collective action, their spiritual depth, and their artistic brilliance. These heads challenge us to rethink our linear narratives of progress, to acknowledge that complexity and ingenuity are not the sole domain of a few great civilizations, but are universal human traits that emerge in diverse forms and places across our planet's history. They invite us to step out of our preconceived notions and embrace the messy, surprising, and endlessly fascinating reality of the past. The Olmec may have vanished from their great centers, their political power, fading into the jungle, but their cultural echoes reverberate still. In the temples of Tikal, in the murals of Bonampak, in the carvings of Teotihuacan, you can sense the Olmec ghost, the foundational spirit of their ingenuity. They remind us that the seeds of civilization, once planted, can grow into magnificent and unexpected forms, even when their original planters are long gone. It's a powerful lesson in legacy, in influence, and in the interconnectedness of human history. Our understanding of ancient Mesoamerica would be incomplete, indeed almost nonsensical, without acknowledging the profound, silent contributions of these basalt-faced giants. And so we leave our ancient sculptor standing before a newly completed colossal head, sweat on their brow, dust on their hands, but a profound sense of accomplishment in their heart. They might not have known that their work would be rediscovered millennia later, challenging the brightest minds of a distant future. But they knew they were part of something important, something enduring, something that spoke of their people's strength and vision. That connection across time, that shared human spirit of creation and purpose, is perhaps the greatest secret these colossal heads whisper to us today. They are not merely stones, they are stories waiting for us to listen, to learn, and to wonder. Good night.